Okay, so one of the things that I mislearned, having grown up as a progressive, like my dad was extremely progressive, and then I grew up in that culture and ideology, and then carried it with me into adulthood, and had organized my life around it and my understanding of things and people. That bit me in the ass, like very, very hard. Now, I'm not saying that means the conservative understanding is more correct or better. The place I've sort of come to is that, like, I think they work best systemically in concert with each other, and that they can be a counterbalance. When one side goes too far, you kind of like bring it back. So I think there are accurate things, but it's not an either or for me. It's systemic. Anyway, so one of the things that I mislearned is that if someone is a victim, they're innocent and therefore a safe person. And we don't really think about this in those terms usually, but generally speaking, the response you're going to get to when someone is doing something wrong is it's not their fault. They went through this horrible thing. And I personally invested in this conversation because this often happens around children who've been in abusive homes. I did a video on it, but the idea that a child who comes from an abusive home is an innocent and therefore safe person, everybody's putting themselves in a potentially unsafe situation when you believe those things. Now I was lucky. My foster parents knew better. They had already had like a foster kid, for example, who had tried to set a fire in the closet. Um, so they already knew, yes, are these kids vulnerable, but also they are not necessarily safe. And so one does not necessarily equate to the other. You can have been harmed and then go on to do harmful things. I One of my most recent examples of this was a homeless woman I was helping get out of an abuse dynamic. She did eventually get out of the abuse dynamic. And then she goes into a relationship with the next homeless dude and started being abusive to him. I was like, what? What? Anyway, so I see this pattern like a lot, but what I wanted to talk about it for was ways I've seen it happen when the black sheep or the scapegoat of a family who's abused, who's put in that one down position, they're lowest in the family hierarchy for whatever reason, and then they go on to date. Now, I will say my three examples I'm about to give are all of men. I'm not saying this doesn't happen with women. I'm just saying I happen to have very good examples of this when it comes to dudes. So my first example is from my abusive ex, who's the one who I started dating after my son's father had started being abusive. And then I was like, my son was 5 and I'd been a stay-at-home mom, and I was trying to like dig myself out of this like hole that I was in. So I started dating this guy. And he gave me the sad, sad story of his horrible childhood circumstances, which he could have been an unreliable narrator, but I took it for face value and I felt pricked within my heart. Oh my gosh, you have been through these horrible things. He went on to be one of the most abusive people I've ever been with. Like, holy shit. What? In his perspective, he was a victim. Everybody was abusing him. So, anyway, we get to a point where well, no, not finally. It was in the middle. We were like getting back and forth for like many years. It was sad. But one of the things was he left me for someone that he had cheated on me with. Okay, how old was he at this point? He was, I want to say like 32. Maybe I was 36. The person he left me for was a young woman who was like 19. She was in college. She was a beauty pageant contestant. And in fact, he had the audacity to sit here and tell me about, oh no, people don't realize beauty queens, it takes a lot of work to do that. And actually it's really requires a lot of skills. Like, I didn't grow up with Sandra Bullock and Miss Congeniality. So first of all, you can the audacity. But then secondly, he started complaining to me about her. So this was the cycle. He loved how I treated him, but he didn't like being held accountable. I also made him feel insecure because like I was working, I had a job and he really didn't. Um so he found someone that he felt better than. But then so like when he was getting with her, he was complaining to her about me. Then he gets with her. Then he starts complaining to me about her. And I think he thought that I would be like, "Oh my gosh, she's terrible. I can't blah blah blah. You should be with me. I'm better." I dead ass looked at him in his face. Like, you picked her. She's doing exactly everything she should be doing for her age and development. What? So this is kind of that. Yesterday, I said it in the comments, but sometimes there are abusers who go out in the world to complain about their current victim. That's the abuser that I'm going to look them straight in their face and be like, you pick this person. I'm not going to sit here and participate in, piling on about how they're so deficient. This reflects on you, buddy. So in this particular instance, he was complaining that she was immature. Excuse you? She's 19, then 20. She had a birthday. She got herself into school, got it paid for with scholarships and like beauty pageant winning stuff. She was successful in these competitions. But like, yeah, she's not 32 level mature. You're not even 32 level mature. Anyway, so I 100% was like, I'm not piling on her with you. She's doing exactly everything she needs to be doing. And honestly, one of the parts that I finally got to the point where I was able to, in my heart, accept that he was pathetic. Doesn't mean he won't ever not be pathetic, but this person that I had been dealing with, that I had very rose-colored glasses about, she ended up going and getting hospitalized in a psychiatric institution because she was so upset that he might be coming to be back in a relationship with me. And so after she gets institutionalized and he has no access to her, he comes and finds me to like hang out and do stuff with me and my friend group. To say I was flabbergasted is not even, I was like, I cannot believe you're treating this young person this way. And then he would tell me like, oh, but she needs me. Like, she didn't need you. She didn't need what you're doing to her. Anyway, that's example number one. Example number two is someone who is very close to me in my life who essentially was a surrogate father to me that I've known since I was 11. And so this was hard to realize. This is hard to realize. So he was the lower status person in his own family. And he was the one who always did the right thing and who always took care of his parents and who was responsible and blah, 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 all of the things, right? And so he then goes into relationships with women and he absolutely is now the abuser in these relationships. He goes after women who are vulnerable, who need help. He helps the women. So magnanimous, so helpful. They're grateful, right? So he's in this, I'm helping, I'm giving. I'm such a great, person to date. The lady ends up dating and he personally loves hot women. I remember when I was a kid, he would talk explicitly about how he wanted to date like a Brazilian, like a beautiful Brazilian woman. Well, first of all, there's no reason I should have known that at 11, 12, 13. So I didn't understand that that was wrong information for me to have, already bad boundaries, but also he's orienting on people in this extremely superficial way about how they look. It's not about who they are, other than the fact that he can use that to get what he wants. So anyway, he's now on his third marriage. Each of these women has been gorgeous. But anyway, so he starts dating them when they're in a bad place. And then after he starts to feel comfortable, like he's got them, he's secured them, he's paid for enough stuff, he has leverage now. He starts saying, well, why aren't you doing anything? I thought you were going to go be successful. Why aren't you taking care of this? Why aren't you doing that? When I tell you the switch up and how shocked these women probably were. And so he would come to me and say, oh, she didn't have a job or anything. I thought that, she didn't have one, because it was this and that, but like, now it's been XYZ. And I was looking at him like, bro, you picked her. You picked her. This is not a reflection on her. This is a reflection on you. You think this is bad, and so you're going to complain about it? You went out and found someone who was vulnerable. You went out and found someone who needed help and then acted like because you were being so magnanimous that she owed you something. It's incel shit. Anyway, that is my second example. So he's going out into the world complaining about these women he picked that he knew were not at a particular standard and then beat them over the head with it. All right, example number 3. So this person, I'm not going to say that they were abusive in this relationship. I think they might have ended up they went from being an abuser to now being in a relationship that, if not completely abusive, was definitely ramping up in that direction. And this person, however, was so when he was young, he was, again, bottom status, lowest tier, black sheep, scapegoat, whatever. His dad said things to him like, "You'll never amount to anything messing around with computers." So, see, he was not the person who was respected in his family. So he goes out and he, another one who likes to date women who are vulnerable. In his case, he really loved women who had a child, like single moms. And so he would show up and be great with a kid for like a night and then leave. And they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, you're so great." And like, if he happened to do something around the house, they'd be just so thankful. And on a, psychological level, I think he was looking for someone to give him the love and nurturing he did get from his own mother. Like, he legitimately was abused as a kid. But then he goes on into relationships where he then becomes abusive. So he finally gets out of the relationship where he's being the abuser, and he goes into this new one with someone who is deeply controlling. He's dating her because, honestly, I think she had boobs. I think that's what it was. She was smart, but also stacked. And she has what I kind of a goth spirit, which is where you hate everybody, everyone's stupid, blah, blah, blah. And I say that as someone who has had that, so I'm well familiar with it. And so he got included in that bubble. And also, she was doing things that were highly controlling and also things that were not like respectful of his career. So, for example, if he had a career event, like like you go to a work event after hours, she would demand to go. But it wasn't one where you like bring partners. It's like, this is a work event. We're networking or we're doing something. It's team building. And so she would try to go. And there were other things that she was doing, like she was stalking him, etc. But so he's complaining to me about this person. And I'm like, okay, this is not separate from you. You chose this person. He had gone on from being a victim of abuse to being an abuser to now possibly being a victim of abuse. But like, not a lot of self-reflection. So anyway, I wanted to sort of fuller flesh out that comment that I made and sort of also kind of counter what I had said at the end of the last video, talking about how if you're in a relationship with a terrible person, maybe we need to look at what is happening there to like work through it. And since there are abusers in victim spaces, or people who were victims and are now abusers in victim spaces, there are also victim in victim spaces, and there are victims in victim spaces who think they're the abuser, and it gets very, very confusing. Again, this is, on a side note, this is why I usually orient on safety, because that cuts through it. You don't have to make a judgment about who you are and what has happened, in the moment to decide I'm going to be a safe person. And even if I was abusive in the past, I don't have to be abusive in the future. And also, many victims of abuse were not abusive in the past to not be abusive in the future. But I'm trying to give people constructs that allow them to make safe choices moving forward. And then once you get that space and distance, you can more objectively look back and sort of what happened and all the things. But I wanted to get really explicit about why I'm very careful so often, because you're often talking to abusers when you're doing abuse resources. And they may legitimately have been victims and then go on to be unsafe people. And they often justify it to themselves because they're entitled or because of their feelings or whatever it is. And so they go on to be shitty to other people. Now, just because the three examples I gave were of men and like heteronormative situations does not mean that that is the only way this applies. It just means that I had some really good examples from that. So anyway, I hope this makes sense, and I'll talk to you next time.